Who has a question or a comment?
I have one.
Yes.
We live in Richmond Hill and work in Richmond. The problem that we have, as Fred says, is the public transit and public transportation, in particular the metro system. We have extreme difficulty hiring people from other parts of Toronto, and we are really forced to hire people that are locally living in Richmond Hill or in the vicinity of Richmond Hill, and it makes our job extremely difficult. What are the plans for the transit system, in particular Finch North and the Metro? That will facilitate our jobs by far more than what we have now.
We have come to recognize recently, and when I say we, I think it's the province, the federal government, and the city governments, plural, York Region, Toronto, have realized that we can no longer afford to operate our transit system on the basis that it was operated before, which was that you never had any higher order transit line like a subway that crossed regional boundaries, that you have to start thinking about how GO train service is provided on the basis that it's a region where people need to move around to work and to live, and on the basis of even just the integration of bus service. As you well know, now it's not even easy to take a bus, from one municipality, say York Region, to Toronto, and use the subway without having to pay either more or pay twice. And so what we're working on is the following. The first project that was opened, that set the precedent, and it's now open up into York Region, is the University Spadina Vaughan subway. The second project that is in planning now, and there's money put in by all three governments to do the planning, is the Yonge Street subway extension north of Finch up to Highway 7. I will say to you, I have said as the Mayor of Toronto, and you'll understand the sensibility of this, that as long as the Yonge Street subway is overcrowded, I can't in good conscience allow that subway extension to proceed until we also build the relief line downtown that will relieve the pressure that's mostly at Yonge and Bloor. The Yonge Street subway is already overcrowded. It will be helped by the new train control system, which will increase capacity by 20%. But the main thing we have to do is build that relief line. So what's happening is those two projects, the relief line and the Yonge Street North Extension, are on the same timetable, so they can open at the same time. And both are the subject of hundreds of millions of dollars of planning and design work that is being done now with a view to keep them moving forward. But as you know, subway projects take a long time. They usually take about 10 years. But at least we finally started the process of doing that work. The third thing that I think people underestimate that fits into the category of what you talked about is SmartTrack. SmartTrack was never designed to start at Steeles Avenue and go downtown. It was designed deliberately to start in Markham. Stouffville, actually, is the farthest place it'll go. Because, why did we do that? Because there's a huge concentration of jobs in Markham, and because people told us exactly what you said, which is that we can't hire people in Markham who want to live in downtown Toronto. They just want to live there because it's where the action is. A lot of the smart young people, as you know, want to live downtown. And they will say, I'm not going to work in Markham, it's too far, I can't get there properly on transit. When SmartTrack opens in 2023, 2024, which I know seems a long way away, but it's not that far away, people will be able to get on that train at Union Station or Liberty Village, where they want to live, and ride the train right to Stouffville. And they'll be able to do it for the same price as riding the TTC. That's assuming that Michael is successful in convincing his government that they should go along with something that I think the previous government very wisely did, which is to say that they would finance a fare on GO and on the TTC that's the same fare. So if you're traveling inside Toronto, it's $3 and within 10 kilometers. So I would just say to you that hope is on the way for what you talked about. We're going to have the Yonge Street subway extended north. We have the Vaughan subway already there, and we have SmartTrack going to Stouffville. So you'll have 3 rapid transit lines that will move people back and forth. And it's not all one way. Some of those people will go to work downtown. People always think of it that way. I think a lot of them are going to come the other way and come to work here because there's a lot of exciting things going on here. But we're on to that, and we're on to integrating the transit systems, especially when it comes to how much you pay. Because people don't care what the color of the bus is. They don't care where the boundary is between Toronto and York Region. They don't care. They don't even know where it is. They just care they can get on a train or a bus and go to work and come home. And that it's simple for them and that it's affordable for them. And that's what we're trying to do now with all the different things we're doing.
Thank you. I just have one more question, if you don't mind. Have you seen 404 North after 7 o'clock coming down from Stouffville? It's just like a car parking lot.
No, I know. And that's because of, again, all the people that are coming. What's interesting about the 404 and the Parkway and the Gardiner Expressway is now both times of the day the traffic is busy going both ways. you know, because there are as many people going to Mississauga to work or going to Markham to work as there are going the other way. And so that's why it is so important. And I say to people all the time, because people raise traffic with me and say it's a terrible problem, and I say yes, and they say, what have you done about it? And I'll tell them a whole list of things we've done. But with the city growing as fast as it is, there are more people coming all the time, and some of them have cars. And until we have proper transit, including the Yonge North Extension, Smart Track, the Downtown Relief Line, you know, et cetera, all the different projects, until those are built and people are riding on them, they don't have any alternative but to drive their car. And so we have to build the transit, and that's why I think Fred says we got to build more. He's right. If we had the money, we should build more, so that we can say to people, you do not have to use your car. We have a much cheaper, much more environmentally friendly, much more effective way to get to work, and it's faster. And so that's why we have to build this transit.
Thank you.
Take a couple of more, and then we'll get back to just chatting one-on-one. Who else has a question or comment? Yes, Fred. Fred.
About the affordable housing.
Yes.
Usually, any prime minister we elected or during election time, and the premier, well, not one of them, at least all of them, in the last few elections that I remember here in this country, I'm almost 40 years in this city. And they're coming and they're saying, okay, we have the affordable housing. But affordable housing after the war, if you remember, maybe you know that, in the north part of the city, Etobicoke, Fairview Mall area, so many areas, lots of apartment building has been built, all rental. How built it? Because at that time, no development charges, no park levy, no school levy, no. But now everything is there. We just having is about $150 in 905 at least. The cost of those things, you know, is about $150 per square foot. If those kind of money are paid by the province or by federal government, municipality can produce lots of things by private sector. It has been done, you know, 50 years ago. Can be done now. And the private sector is the tool that they can provide that affordable housing.
So Fred, what we're doing is exactly what you're talking about. And we had a program that we started this year, and it proved to be successful, but on a smaller scale, and it needs to be scaled up. It was called the Open Doors program, and it was meant to encourage the private sector to build affordable housing as part of the developments that they would do overall. As you know, there now is something called inclusionary zoning, which will actually make that compulsory, that there be a certain percentage of affordable housing in developments. But what we did that worked, and it speaks exactly to what you're talking about, is we did three things. We said first and foremost, we're going to put up public land. And it's one of the reasons why it was necessary for us to gather all the land we had into one place so that we could say, for example, I'll give you an example that's not that close to here, but at Islington and Bloor, where 3 of the 4 corners have been developed with office buildings and whatnot, there's one corner that presently consists of a TTC yard where they move buses around and do things like that. They may need to do that at that particular place, I don't know, but the bottom line is above that, there's nothing at the moment. There's just a yard there where they move buses around. We have plenty of fire departments, for example, that are in very strategic locations on main streets because you have to have fire departments, fire halls all over the place. There's nothing above them. There's just a 2-story building with a garage in the bottom. There is no reason why that fire department couldn't be relocated inside a building that includes affordable rental housing using our land. So one of the things we're doing is putting up public land to say to the private sector, okay, we'll give you the land for $1 a year, but you have to come here and build a building that has a certain percentage of affordable housing, and in return for that. The other government, the federal government in particular, is also putting up money. So we can say, not only can we give land, we can forgive development charges, or we can defer taxes or forgive taxes, or we can put in cash. And so, because we know that the private sector is not going to come along and just build affordable housing because it makes them feel better. We need to make sure that we can make it an attractive proposition for them so that we can achieve both the social and economic goals of having more people living in affordable rental housing. So I'm hoping by ramping up the target substantially for the next 4 years. And by the way, I've set a target of 40,000 units essentially over the next 10 or 11 years. My opponent says she can do 100,000 units. I don't know how many people in here in the development business would tell me it is possible, given the trades, given the planning process, given everything, to do 100,000 units in 10 years. Everybody tells me it's not possible. I don't believe, I guess because I came from business, unlike her, I came from business, and I believe what you do is you set out a realistic target you can achieve. Where did my target come from? It came from talking to the industry and talking to the city staff. And I said, what's the maximum number of units you think we could achieve over a 10-year basis? And they said 30,000. I actually persuaded them to allow me to increase it to 40,000 because I wanted to be a bit more ambitious. If I thought they ever could go anywhere near 100,000, I would have had that conversation with them, but they told me that kind of number was just not possible. Not because we're chicken or because we're lazy, it's because it's just not practical. So I picked a number of 40,000, which I believe is going to be great for us to achieve. If we can do better, then let's do it. But 40,000 is the number that I picked for that reason. Who else has one more? Maybe yes, sir.
I recently came back from the Netherlands, and I was surprised to see a 10-story building with a fire station on the first floor. It was newly built. And then I think of the corner of York Mills and Bayview, where there's a fire station, and the land's quite valuable there. Has the city thought of any initiatives where you could build over, or put a new building in place where you sell the air rights and incorporate fire station, whatever, in there to take advantage of that property and intensify housing in the neighborhood?
Yes, we have, and I'll be honest with you, one of the things that really caused me to move quickly to create this new organization that put all the real estate that's owned by the city into one place was because I read the fire department's master plan. And when the first year I was mayor, probably the first month I was mayor, and their master plan is kind of like a business plan they have for themselves. And one of the things they said in there is, we're going to take our land and all these fire halls, and there's many like that. I'm familiar with that one. It has a particularly big piece of land on a very sort of attractive corner. We're going to take all of our land, and what we're going to do is we're going to allow for development of that piece of land, and we're going to get a new fire hall in the bottom. There's no reason you can't do that.
Yeah.
And then we're going to keep the money to buy new trucks and new this and new that. I knew that the amount of money they'd get from developing 3 of those buildings was going to be way more than they needed to buy new equipment for the next 25 years. And what they were sort of saying is, this is our land, the fire department, and we're going to keep the money. And so I thought to myself, no, that's not right. We have to make sure it is our land in the much broader sense of saying that that land should be redeveloped. Not that particular one, but those pieces of property where appropriate should be developed, whether it's for a 4-story or a 12-story or a townhouse, whatever, and a new fire hall, and that the money is then available for broader public purposes than just investing in the fire service. And I'm happy to have them keep a portion of it since it's land they've been using. So the whole idea of this bringing together all the real estate is to take not just fire hall, but TTC lands, green P parking lots. Think of the number of green P parking lots we have that we own all across the city in places where you could easily have something there, have a parking lot, underground or whatever, but also have above the ground some housing for people. So I can just tell you that's exactly what we're going to do over the next number of years, because they're not making any more land in Toronto last time I checked. So we have to take the land we already own and strategically maximize the use of that land, not because the police department says you can't, or the TTC says you can't, or the fire department says it's ours, but because we view it as a collective asset that we have that should be deployed in the best way strategically for the broadest public interest. So the answer to your question is yes, that's exactly what we're going to do. The final question goes to Ahmad because he put you all together.
Just related to the power of mayor, is there going to be any changes to increase the power of the mayor?
I don't know. The question is about the power of the mayor. The person who first talked about this actually was Premier Ford. And he talked about it in his book that he wrote, and he talked about it afterwards and said the mayor of Toronto and other mayors should be a more powerful position because it allows you to get more done. I came out and later said I thought that would be a good idea. I wasn't seeking more powers for the sake of saying we had them. I just felt that it could lead to more efficient government and would really match the responsibility, the power of the office with the accountability that I have. As you might have noticed now, not different than being a CEO of a company. If you're CEO of a company, everybody turns to you and says, well, what about this, no matter what the problem is, even if you had nothing to do with it. And I'm not complaining about that. Everybody comes to me as the mayor and says, what about transit? What about traffic? What about this and that? And some of which I have very little direct control over. In fact, very few things do I have direct control to say, well, fix it this way or do that. And so I think to allow the mayor to be more involved in setting the direction and including the budget, subject to some veto that the council could have if a strong majority of them said, no, you're not doing the right thing, I think would be a step forward. And I've only said in response to the Premier having raised it that I'd be interested in discussing it because I think it could lead to better government for the City of Toronto. But as of the moment, it's not something he's talk to me about specifically, and I'm sure that may come up as a discussion down the road, and I will have that discussion with them. But if you said to me, I have to get elected this time around, knowing the rules won't change for the next 4 years, I'd say that's fine. I'll deal with the rules. We've got a lot done the last 4 years without having a powerful mayor system, and we will get lots done for the next 4 years if that's what the rules are, because my job is to get things done, not to fuss, for hours at a time about what the powers of the office are. You will get the last word, sir.
One more.
Yeah.
We talk about transportation, we talk about real estate, everything. How about safety? SPAN is also trying to do
Community safety?
What is the really plan for the safety? Because everybody wants to be a safe city.
Yeah. First of all, I want to say something I often say, and people are critical of me for saying it, but it's just the truth. I only speak the truth about this, and the facts bear me out. This is still, while we're having some challenges this year, this is still a very safe city. It is still one of the safest cities in the world. It is the safest big city in North America. We've had some challenges this year. One of the reasons the city overall is still safe is because the challenges are in isolated areas of the city, and that's not to say it makes them any smaller or less concerning, but they're in isolated areas of the city. Most of those challenges, in terms of the level of violent activity we've seen, are related to gangs, most of it. And so we have to get at those gangs, and I think there's three things that we're trying to do right now in order to make sure we try and address the problems where they exist and keep the city overall safe. Number one, in no particular order, number one is to supply more resources to the police. And so with the help of the Government of Ontario, we are putting a substantial additional investments into the police, and not just police officers, but also technology. Because fighting crime is different than it was 25 years ago, and a lot of it, if you think about how they can keep track of the activities of the gangs through social media, you need people who are expert at getting that information off the social media and picking it up in the context of gang activity. Just to cite one example, and I'm not an expert on this myself by any means. So both of those two governments, and we've made application to the federal government, and I've had assurances from the Prime Minister and from Minister Blair, and I'm sure with the support of people like Ali, that we've made application to get some funds that have been set aside for this purpose in the federal government, and we applied for that, some of that will go to the police as well. The second thing we're doing is we are pressing to get some of the laws changed, because I think some of the laws right now are just not adequate to properly protect in 2018 public safety. The laws that I talk about most frequently are the bail laws, because the bail laws right now repeatedly let people who are repeat offenders back out while they're awaiting trial. So what will happen is you'll get charged with a gun offense, and you will be awaiting trial on that, and you go back out and get charged again. And that's the time to me when it's the second time when they should say, terribly sorry, you are not getting out. You're going to stay in jail till your trial. And if you're found innocent, that's unfortunate, but we've had to keep you in because twice you got charged with gun offenses and you violated your bail conditions by even going near a gun after you got out on bail. So we're having good cooperation and discussions. We're having both with the federal and provincial governments about ways to tighten up the bail. The other is the gun laws, which you've seen in the newspapers today, is under active consideration, and I commend the Government of Canada for the fact that at the invitation of myself as Mayor of Toronto, but also the Mayor of Montreal, they're at least looking at the question of answering the question that I put all the time, which is, if you live in the City of Toronto, why do you need to have a handgun? And my answer is, you don't, unless you're a police officer. So to me, we should be looking at laws that really tighten that up even further. And then the third category, which I think is the one that is really important in the long term, and this is again where we're in good partnerships with the federal government. Even this summer they did some wonderful things. What's it called, Ali? The Canada Youth Works or Canada Summer Jobs Program?
Summer job.
And the province too. We've got to invest in the neighborhoods where the problems are most prevalent, because they tend to be neighborhoods where also the income levels are the lowest, the school dropout rate is the highest, the single parent families are the highest, the housing is in often the poorest condition, and we have to invest in those neighborhoods, because what is happening is, I've made the expression before, nobody is born bad. No child that comes out of the womb at 9 months is born bad. It is circumstances that cause them sometimes to go off on a fork in their life that is a fork we would not want to see them do. And I think if we invest in these kids in particular when they're young and have positive activities for them, support for them to stay in school, if you think about it, a lot of parents can't help their kids with their homework, either because there may be a language barrier, there may be a lack of educational attainment by the parents, and so those kids start to struggle in school and then they drop out, and once they've dropped out, then that's when they're going to be prey to the gangs. And so if we help them with their homework, if we create positive activities for them after school, whether it's music or sports or robotics or you know, you name it, then we are going to have a much better chance of keeping those kids far away from gang and gun activity. And that's why we have such a strong partnership, which I think is going to get stronger, because again, the federal government for sure has set aside millions of dollars for additional community investment, which we've applied for just to get Toronto's share. And we're going to invest in a lot more of those programs that keep the kids away from gangs and violence. And I think if we do those three things, support the police, tighten up some of the laws, and invest in kids and families, we will have a much better chance of making sure that we keep the level of violence hopefully to zero. But I mean, in a big city, you want to keep it down as low as you can. And this year has been very challenging in that regard. But I do repeat what I said at the beginning. It is still a safe city. The job we have is to keep it that way.
Just an observation, you're saying we have to invest in our children, in the low-income children. It's all over the papers these days that Premier Ford is cutting all the social assistance programs like music for underprivileged children, after school activity, all the funding. It was in the paper today. The mother of the 2 kids who got shot in the park had a big, huge rally about this, that the music funding for after school for specific area has been cut by Premier Ford.
Is Michael still, yeah, I want to be fair about that. What in fact happened was that an increase in the funding for next year was actually canceled for now. I always live on the basis that if people speak up, including yourself and the mother, Stacey King, of the 2 girls and so on, that the government will look at that and say, you know what, that actually is a very good investment. And you don't look at it as an investment, but if you look at it from the standpoint of money, $500,000 going into that program that might keep 10 kids from getting into a bad life is worth way more than $500,000 for those people and for the community at large. And so I will just say to you that I'm not familiar with all the aspects of why they canceled that particular planned increase in funding. But I think you're right. We all have to stand up and say these are good programs that produce significant benefits for the community and for these people, for the kids, and for their parents, and for the neighborhoods. And so you're right. I mean, those programs need to be expanded, not contracted. And so I'm certainly speaking up. I was asked about it on radio this morning and said, these kinds of programs are good. They work. And we've got to keep funding them. So you're up, but people have to speak up. It isn't just me that has to speak up, it's people. Thank you very much, Ahmad. Thank you all very much.